What's going on, people? My name is Antoine, this is ATM Tech, and welcome to the channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be bringing you a pretty comprehensive test of the camera on the S22 Ultra. Now, I have done a full review on the S22 Ultra, but I felt as though the camera system did deserve its own video. So what you're watching right now is some test footage in quite a few various different situations to give you a feel of how the video performs in everyday life. So although the video on this phone is capable of 4K 60, I did shoot all this footage in 1080p at 30 frames. The reason why I've done that is because these are the default camera settings, and for the vast majority of people, these are the settings you are going to be using. Not only that, if you're shooting in 4K 60, you are going to eat through your memory pretty quickly. And with just 128 gigabytes of storage built in and no expandable memory, storage is a bit of a premium. Shooting at 1080p rather than 4K will significantly save on your battery as well. So one thing that I noticed when I was looking back at this footage is that the stabilization is pretty damn sweet. All of this footage was shot handheld while just walking at normal speed, and the combination of digital stabilization as well as optical image stabilization did a really good job. If you do want to use the S22 Ultra for just everyday blogging, then you absolutely don't need any form of gimbal or stabilization. So the S22 Ultra comes with a quad camera system, which is comprised of a 108 megapixel wide angle camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, and two 10 megapixel telephoto lenses, with one at 3 times optical zoom and the other at 10 times optical zoom. Now, moving away from video to photo, all of these images were captured using Samsung's Expert RAW camera app. This is basically a separate app which Samsung had developed which gives you full manual control of your images, which on its own is nothing new, but then it does output a true RAW file which you can then take into Lightroom and edit to your heart's content. So most of the photos you're seeing here are the before and then after with a very quick edit. I must say, after going around central London and shooting in all different types of lighting conditions, just the basic raw flat image you get out of the camera without any editing looks pretty nice. But on top of that, you can edit and tweak the photo as you want, and these raw files were pretty easy to work with. If you've ever taken a JPEG and tried to bump the exposure up a little bit or lift the shadows, you know that generally introduces quite a lot of noise. But with these raw files, I had absolutely no issues and full versatility. In Samsung's first iteration of the Expert RAW app, you could only use the main wide camera, but they have updated it now so you can use all 4 lenses. Speaking of the other lenses, I really need to give Samsung their props when it comes to the 3 times and 10 times optical zoom. Now, I've always been an advocate for ultra wide lenses and never really used the zooms, but I think that's because in the past zooms on phones just weren't very good, so you just didn't want to use them. But I found myself using the 3 times and the 10 times zoom quite often. The fact that both the 3 times and 10 times zoom are both optical, it gives me that confidence knowing I can zoom in without any loss of quality. Samsung have really raised the bar here with what I expect out of a zoom. Now, this phone can zoom up to 100 times. It's certainly not the cleanest image, but it has come quite a long way since they first introduced it on the S20 Ultra. Once you take the image, it does a bit of post-processing to clean it up a bit. Now, I'm not a huge selfie guy, but here are some selfies. I took these few using Samsung's portrait mode, and I must admit, it looked pretty effective and somewhat natural, which is not something that I come to expect from portrait modes. When it was first introduced years ago, it did not look this clean, but I would say this is a somewhat convincing bokeh in the background. So with the S22 series, Samsung made a real marketing push with its low light photography, or what they call Nightography. And I think with phone cameras, there's a real delicate balance of the photo looking bright enough, but not too bright where it doesn't look like real nighttime. And I think Samsung have really nailed that balance here. The large sensor does a really good job of gathering light, so it doesn't need to rely too heavily on post-processing. The S22 Ultra does have a night mode, but all of these night images were taken again in the Expert RAW app. The area where it did struggle slightly is using the telephoto lenses in low light, which makes sense because they do have smaller apertures. But you can see there's a loss of sharpness and detail when you use the zoomed in lenses at night. So as someone who creates content for a living and uses professional level equipment every day, I think the camera on the S22 Ultra is pretty sweet. Have we reached a point where I can sell all my gear and just use this phone? Absolutely not. However, the software in this phone does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So if you just need to produce a quick result with minimal effort, then I think the S22 Ultra is a great option. Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering about battery life, so I took my phone off charge at 8 AM this day, and by 3 PM it was pretty much dead. So taking photos really does take a beating. I do talk more about battery life in my full review, so if you haven't seen that one, feel free to check it out, because as a whole the battery on this phone is quite good, but using the camera all day long does kind of just destroy it. But that's enough from me. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.